We give you our best 3 bets for Week 12 of college football, and it all starts right now. Hey guys, it's Matt from GrandstandBettors.com, and we are back with our weekly college football plays here for week number 12. We're going to get to those plays in just a moment, but first, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our college football and NFL plays and predictions each and every week here on our channel. And while you're at it, smash that like button. If you're ready for another fun-filled Saturday of college football, I know I am. So, without further ado, let's dive into this week's action and start things off with a Big Ten matchup between Illinois and number 3 Michigan in the noon Eastern time slot. Michigan minus 17.5 point favorites, and over-under is at the moment set at 41.5. Illinois comes into this matchup 7-3 on the year, and they are on a 2-game losing streak after losing to Purdue 31-24 last week. At times, this has looked like a very good team, especially with that 34-10 win over Wisconsin. Their offense is putting up over 400 yards per game, which is a big improvement from the past few years. And they have done a good job at becoming one of the best defenses in college football. Offensively, they are led by a very good rushing attack behind Chase Brown, who has over 1,400 yards on the ground this season, which is actually 79% of their team production. He also has 7 rushing touchdowns and is averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Now, given how much they run the football, it's kind of crazy to us that the quarterback, Tommy DeVito, also has thrown for over 2,000 yards on the season. The only problem with this offense, though, is they're not putting up points. Now, Illinois is going to take on a Wolverines team coming off a 34-3 win over Nebraska last week. Name of the game for Michigan has been rushing the football. Running back Blake Corum has nearly 1,400 yards this season and 17 touchdowns. As a whole, Wolverines rush the football. They're 4th in the nation with 251 yards per game. Sophomore quarterback J.J. McCarthy has not put up huge numbers this season, but he is managing the games and getting the job done when he needs to. A 7-to-1 touchdown ratio, 69% completion rate, and 8.2 yards per pass for him. Wolverines do have a good group of wide receivers that McCarthy has utilized, but when it comes down to it, this team is going to run the football down your throat, and if you want to beat them, you're going to have to stop that. Now, the other factor for Michigan with this undefeated season has been their defense. They have been unreal. 1st overall in college football, 4th in pass defense, and 1st in run defense. They've also given up the least amount of points in the season. Now, granted, they have only played some mediocre Big Ten teams, so it's going to be hard to gauge if they can keep up with some of the better teams around college football, but certainly up until this point, they've proven they have the personnel to get the job done, and they have shut down opposing offenses thus far. So, what is our best bet for this Big Ten matchup? Well, with how much these teams run the football, we think there's going to be a lot of clock chewed up in this one, and combined, both these teams are only giving up 23 points per game. So we think defense takes center stage here in this really warm-up game for Michigan before the big one next week against Ohio State. So with our first best bet of Week 12 in college football, we're going to take Illinois, Michigan under 41.5 points. Now, the next matchup we're going to look at is going to be with number 4 TCU against Baylor, also in the 12 p.m. Eastern time slot. TCU 2.5 point favorites here, over-under set at 57.5 at the moment. Another team out of the 4 remaining undefeated teams this season is the TCU Horned Frogs. They're coming off that 17-10 win over Texas last week, which was a big statement for this team, especially on the defensive front. A lot of skepticism surrounding this team because of how poorly their defense has been playing, but ever since the 4th quarter against Texas Tech, they seem to have turned a corner in that game last week. They didn't give up a single point until 58 seconds left in the 3rd quarter. They forced 7 punts and 2 turnovers on Texas's first 9 possessions of that game, and they didn't give up an offensive touchdown the entire game. They looked very well coached and very efficient last week, ready to make a statement heading into the final couple weeks of this season. On the other side of the ball, we have been raving about TCU's offense all season. Quarterbacks Max Duggan is now have over 2,500 passing yards and 25 touchdowns and still only 2 interceptions. Quentin Johnson continues to emerge as the number one wideout on the team, but the next two receivers after him on this team have 58 receptions and 800 receiving yards, so he can throw to absolutely anybody and get the job done. Along with a lot of depth at wide receiver, TCU also has a good rushing attack behind Miller. He put up 138 yards and a touchdown last week against Texas and averages 6.6 yards per carry on the season. With the way the defense has looked over the last two games and their offense putting up 40.5 points per game, Baylor is going to have its hands full this week. And speaking of the Baylor Bears, they've had a rough year. They're only sitting at 6-4 on the season. Last week they lost 31-3, I think, to Kansas State, and their offense just stalled when they got onto the Wildcats side of the field. They had 4 turnovers on downs through the course of that game and 2 interceptions, one of which was in the red zone. That's just not going to cut it if you want to win football games. This has been a problem for Shapen all season, as he now has 8 interceptions and only 13 touchdowns. He also has a 65% completion rate and is only averaging 7 yards per completion. The Bears do have a very solid group of wide receivers, though, and they've shown what they can do if Shapen can get them the ball, as they have put up 30 points 7 times on the season. Kansas State showed how to stall the Bears' offense, though, and all it takes is making plays in the secondary, because Baylor has a very minimal rushing attack. They only average 4.7 yards per carry, and they only had 103 rushing yards as a team last week. Now, defensively, the Bears, they've also really struggled this season. They're giving up 25 points per game, conceding 227 passing yards, 132 rushing yards per game. So, when it comes down to it, what is our best bet in this Big 12 matchup? Well, like we've said for almost 3 weeks now, the books need to start respecting TCU as a team. They have a legitimate offense with a very good passing attack and a solid rushing attack, and the defense has looked good for a good 2+ weeks now. This Baylor team has looked mediocre at best this season, but we have little to no faith in them after their performance last week against Kansas State. TCU is going to have little to no problem putting up points in the game and should shut down this Baylor offense fairly easily. So, with our second best bet of Week 12 in college football, we're going to take TCU minus 2.5 over Baylor. Now, before we get into our third best bet of week number 12, just a reminder, if you're looking for our full card for college football for this weekend, head on over to grandstandbettors.com, become part of our family, start living that grandstand life. The link is below in the description. We look forward to seeing you become a part of our community real soon. But, as we mentioned, we do have one more best bet in prime time on Saturday. It's number 7 USC against number 16 UCLA, and USC is a 2.5-point favorite at the moment. The over-under is crazy. It's 76.5 points. Trojans coming into this one 9-1 on the season, and they were a 2-point conversion stop away from being 10-0. USC has played some very close games this season, but what has helped them prevail each and every time has been their offense. Quarterback Caleb Williams has 3,000 yards passing on the season, which is 10th in college football, and he's thrown for 31 touchdowns. That's tied for 3rd in college football, and only 2 interceptions on 342 attempts. When you throw in almost 300 rushing yards and 6 touchdowns as well on the ground, USC has a very dynamic quarterback, which almost every single team that they've played has failed to stop. Now, with 3 wide receivers who all nearly have 500 yards receiving and 16.9 yards per catch, this team can strike on offense quickly, and that's probably why they're putting up 42 points per game. They also have 2 running backs who are averaging 6.3 yards per carry, and in total have 21 rushing touchdowns on the season. UCLA has really struggled on defense this year, so it should be relatively easy for the Trojans offense to put up points in this one. On the other side of the football, USC has had their fair share of struggles on defense. They're giving up about 400 yards per game. The pass defense is ranked 97th in college football. The run defense is ranked a little bit better, but they're still giving up 141 yards on the ground per game, and they gave up 35 points to Cal, 37 points to Arizona, and as a unit, give up 24 points per game. Now, as long as their offense keeps performing the way it has been, this team should keep winning games and outscoring their defense. On the other side of the field, though, UCLA, they are a game behind the Trojans, sitting at 8-2 on the season. Their only loss heading into last week was against Oregon back in Week 8, but last week they suffered a terrible loss, 34-28, to Arizona at home. Like USC, the Bruins offense has carried them throughout the season, and they're putting up 39.5 points per game. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has had a very good senior year. He's put up 2,400 passing yards, almost 500 rushing yards, and 27 total touchdowns. This guy reminds us of Lamar Jackson, that type of player. And with all the other weapons they have on this offense, it makes sense why no team has been able to hold them under 28 points this season. They have Zach Charbonnet at running back, who has over 1,000 yards on the ground, and wide receiver Jake Bobo, who leads the team in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns this season. Now, also, like USC, the Bruins defense has been absolutely atrocious this year. Last week, against Arizona, they gave up 34 points to a 4-16 and 312 yards passing. They're ranked even lower than USC at 101 in pass defense, and their front seven has also struggled to stop opposing rushers, giving up 124 yards per game. With how badly their defense has been this season, it's honestly surprising that this team has 8 wins right now. So what is our best bet in this top 25 Pac-12 matchup this week? Well, both these teams have figured out how to put up crazy numbers on the scoreboard each and every week. We do think, though, that UCLA will have their heads down this week, even though this could be a huge win for their team. But the Bruins lost last week to Arizona, and they know they have no shot at making the playoffs right now. So with our third and final pick for week number 12 in college football, we're going to take the Trojans -2.5 over the Bruins. Well, that does it for us here at Grandstand Bettors. As always, we want you to sit back, relax, enjoy week 12 of college football, and we will see you back here same time, same place next week.